Aloha and welcome everyone to our 2026 OLP series, Korean Online Language Pedagogy. For those of you who don't know me just yet, my name is Sarah Boutin and I am very proud to be serving as the series facilitator. I've been serving as the series facilitator for our online language pedagogy series here at NFLRC at the University of Hawaii of Manoa for several years now, started in 2017. And I absolutely love being part of these webinars. It's a great way to build connections with educators and share practices that can help our students to continue to succeed and climb up that ladder of language proficiency. So we will be jumping into panel two. We're focusing on resources for teaching Korean online. And the series started with an idea. We wanted to serve some of the less commonly taught languages like Korean, for example, and dig in with a panel of experts and an organic conversation to talk about how we teach these languages online, share best practices, and ultimately, hopefully, help our students to become even better at the languages they're learning. So I do have a few quick housekeeping items before we get started. I also do want to extend a huge mahalo and thank you to our friends at NFLRC at the University of Hawaii at Manoa for making the series possible. We really appreciate your efforts. And also the opinions that will be expressed here by the panelists are the opinions of the panelists and not necessarily those of NFLRC. You may or may not be eligible to earn CEU credit for your participation in this session and doing a few supplemental activities afterward. Please check in with your local licensing agency to confirm that. However, I will talk a little bit more about that at the end of our session on Tuesday. And that will be our final session about how you might be able to earn that certificate to potentially earn CEU credit. Also, during our time today, please share your own thoughts, experiences, and questions in the chat so we can learn from each other as well as from our resident experts. And in order to do so in the Zoom meeting chat, please be sure to select everyone in the blue drop-down button in the chat so we can see your comments and questions. Feel free to add your comments and questions as we go through our conversation. We're always eager to hear from our participants. So now, without further delay, I'll go ahead and have our guests introduce themselves. I want to warmly welcome Dr. ARAM CHO of Georgia State University, Dr. Hakyoon Lee of Georgia State University, Professor MEEJEONG Song of Cornell University, and Dr. Sang-Seok Yoon from the University of Iowa. Dr. Cho, if I might have you briefly introduce yourself, please, for our audience. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and we would love to get to know you. Go ahead, please.
Sure, thank you so much. 안녕하세요. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me today. It's a very pleasure to be part of this panel. My name is Aram Cho, and I'm teaching Korean at Georgia State University since 2021. I started my Korean teaching as a Korean TA when I did my master's in 2008, and since then, I have taught Korean in different universities around Georgia area before joining Georgia State University. So I teach here at GSU, I teach Korean courses across different formats, including online and in-person classes, and I also work with students at different levels from beginning to advanced Korean, as well as courses that focus on Korean related contents. So I've been able to see like how the needs of students and the resources we use can be very different depending on the courses format and level. So I'm very happy to be part of today's conversation about resources for online Korean teaching. And I am looking forward to sharing some of the tools or approaches that have worked well in my own teaching, as well as learning from other panelists as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we definitely do learn from each other, which makes the series all the more wonderful. So thank you very much. Let's go to Dr. Hakyoon Lee from Georgia State. If you can please introduce yourself and share a little about your background. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hakyoon, and just like Dr. Cho just introduced, with her, I'm also teaching Korean at Georgia State University since 2000 to 2012. And I'm teaching mostly for online courses for Korean language and culture, as well as Korean proficiency through Korean drama. So those are the two Korean courses I teach online. So I'm so happy to be here today, and thank you so much for having me, and looking forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Excellent. Korean proficiency through Korean drama. I love that idea. Thank you so much. We'll go to Professor MEEJEONG Song. If you can please share a little bit about your background. Thank you.
Hey, hi everyone. My name is MEEJEONG Song, and I'm a teaching professor in the Department of Asian Studies at Cornell, and I'm also a coordinator of the Korean language program. And I've been teaching at Cornell for more than 25 years, since 2001. Yeah, I didn't know that I will, stay in Cornell that long, but I really love this place. And I've been teaching at all levels, from elementary to advanced, and heritage and non-heritage classes. But I teach in-person classes mainly, and like only during the pandemic I did online classes. But and my research focuses are project-based language learning and content-based instruction, heritage language education, and technology-enhanced language education. So I'm very looking forward to today's discussion.
Thank you very much. And we'll go to Dr. Sang-Seok Yoon, please, if you could go ahead.
예. 안녕하세요. Aloha everyone. My name is Sang-Seok Yoon, and I'm currently teaching at the University of Iowa, where I serve as the head of the Korean program. I received both my MA and PhD from the University of Hawaii, so I'm especially happy to be participating in an NFARC's event as a Hawaii's alumnus. Before coming to Iowa, I taught at the University of Minnesota, and altogether I have been teaching Korean for more than 20 years. I'm not currently teaching a full online course, but I have created a large number of video lectures for online and flipped classroom learning. I also taught online courses even before the pandemic. And of course, like many of us, I taught extensively through Zoom during the pandemic. So I'm very happy to share some of the things I learned from those experiences. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm a huge fan of the flipped classroom, so glad to hear that. And just looking forward to diving right in. So our very first question, and our friend Jim Yoshioka is going to go ahead and put that in the chat so you can follow along at home or wherever you may be joining us from. So our very first question, and I'll start with you, Dr. Cho. How do you find and select resources for online Korean courses? What factors matter across listening, reading, writing, and speaking?
Thank you for the question. I think every instructor probably has their own pedagogical criteria for selecting resources, but I'm happy to share some of the things that work for my classes. I think we all know that these days we have access to really an incredible amount of Korean language content online, like YouTube being the largest platform, news site, web dramas, by the way, like students really watch these web dramas on YouTube often, and they really liked it. And there's webtoons, blogs, social media, like Instagram, all kinds of online learning tools and programs as well. So, in fact, sometimes I feel like my students are actually better than I am finding those interesting Korean resources. So, for me, the challenge isn't really finding resources, it's more like filtering and narrowing them down and deciding like is this right resource for this particular learning objective and this for this particular group of students. So because we all know that a resource that works really well for, let's say, beginning Korean learners may not really work at all for advanced learners. And especially like in online or asynchronous courses, I also need to think about whether students can access the resource easily, maybe like free and use independently without too much technical or linguistic support. So I would say my main criteria or factors when I am selecting resources are really a objective of the lesson, and also like student proficiency level, and also how easy to access the resources, and also what students can actually do with the resource. So because I don't want them simply to consume those resources, and I want the resource to kind of lead them towards some types of language use or practice, and ideally some learning. So I personally use quite a lot of YouTube videos and shorts. I like shorts because it's short and but contains like very important expressions and words at the same time, and it's very and it's students love to watch them. So I look at things like when I search those shorts, I look at things like speed of conversation or talk, vocabulary level, and pronunciation, like clear pronunciation, and mainly like they have whether they have like grammar or objective that reflect the target lesson. So when I select them, I also think about how, like, what kind of support I can provide, like maybe a short transcript with some blanks or some key vocabulary chart if the video is long, sometimes comprehension questions, or maybe a pre-listening activities. And these work well for other areas, like reading and writing as well. Although I would consider like the types or genre of the writing and reading, especially like length and sometimes students' background knowledge, because a text may not be linguistically difficult, but if students don't have enough cultural or contextual knowledge, it can still be very challenging. So, like I said, I think about some very practical issues as well, part of my factors. So like reliability, accessibility, and cost. So a resource might be, pedagogically really fantastic, but if students need like different accounts to access it, or if the website changes continuously or disappears after a semester, it becomes difficult to incorporate into a course. So to kind of sum up what I select on an online resource, I'm pretty much checking those boxes, like does it fit into my learning objective? Is it appropriate for my students? And can I make it to an opportunity for students to actually use Korean and create additional activity out of those resources? So because I really want my students not just consume the resources, but learn something out of those resources.
So you mentioned quite a lot there, and there's so much to go through. And as I was listening to your response, I'm realizing just how much we have to act as true filters as online educators, because there is a lot of content out there, but at the end of the day, so much of it just turns out to be noise that's really not going to be helpful. So in terms of making sure the students can access it, not just is it behind a paywall, is it a free resource they can easily access? Do they need an account? But also accessibility in general, too. For example, those of us who are in the K-12 environment, we really need to be mindful that we are serving all students. So that's another factor we have to take in. And it's a lot of filtering, as you said, and it definitely is time consuming, but we want to make sure we're finding the best resources. Thank you, Dr. Cho. Dr. Yoon, I'll go to you next. And again, it's going to be the same question about finding resources. How do you find and select resources for online Korean courses? What factors matter most across listening, writing, speaking, and listening?
Yeah, actually teaching online is not a simple task. Like we cannot simply do what we do on in like, in-person class online, but we have to think differently when we meet students in so online. So in a face-to-face classroom, the instructor can constantly see, how they, react and, how they behave in class. But we cannot, monitor them, well, in online classes. Generally, all I can see is like, their like forehead, and sometimes they do something else during the class. So yeah, it's very challenging to teach them efficiently online. So when I choose like resources, online resources for online courses, the reliability is very, very important. So there are lots of information, and lots of video clips, on YouTube and online everywhere. So one thing is, you have to make sure if those materials are reliable. So in my case, I have created, I cannot believe in, lots of sources. So I have created a series of video lectures myself. And, students are, supposed to watch those videos before coming to class. So yeah, during the class, we can save some time for explaining those details, during the class. But actually, in reality, it's not working perfectly. So, some students watch them. Generally, good students watch them and come, and they are getting better. But bad student is not a good term. But some students, some students don't really watch those videos and just come without background disinformation and just struggle during the class. But I realized that before the exam, they go back to the video. So, generally speaking, it has been working okay. So, there are things we can do for making this efficient. There are questions, that can be only answered after watching those videos. And so I have been doing lots of, you know, strategies, but it's kind of okay. It's not working perfectly, but it's okay. And also, I try to find out interesting videos. So, how much interesting and engaging of those materials? That's important factors, when I choose those video materials. As Aram mentioned, there are very interesting contents on YouTube. And in my case, I try to find some good resources like short films. So it's not easy to watch the full-length film in class, but there are lots of good short films, on YouTube. So you can just search, Korean short films. And I put one link there, resource, link there, Asian short films. So there are lots of short films, produced in Korea, Japan, China. So you can find your interests. And so you can show the full movie during the class. And there are lots of free Korean movies on YouTube. So we can just give students assignments as assignments. They can choose to watch some of the videos, movies they would like, and maybe they can make presentations about the movies they watch, on YouTube. And also, commercial films are really good resource. So they are fun and short, and sometimes it's very challenging to figure out what is being advertised just by watching the advertisement. So, I found one archive, online archive, where they have lots of commercial films and, commercials in text. So you can make use of those commercials, as authentic materials. It can be used both in online and, in-person class. And another type of commercial is public information films, produced by, Korean government, funded, offices. So they are really, high quality, and they have like very strong message that reflects this, current issues in Korea. So there are lots of potentials of discussing on Korean, cultural issues while watching those kind of videos. So in short, I am thinking of how much I can trust this material pedagogically. So I have to screen it, very carefully. And then, is it fun to watch? That's my second priority when I choose, online materials.
I agree that it's important to try to make online learning fun and entertaining whenever possible. If I think back to my high school algebra days where I was just a captive member of an audience and my teacher didn't have to be entertaining because I was sitting in the classroom alongside all my fellow students and there weren't many distractions, but our students can sometimes be very distracted. So I think it is important to factor in the entertainment factor as well. It is a lot of filtering, but it makes it more engaging for the students. I'm also a huge fan of the flipped classroom myself. I really try to encourage my students to study material ahead of time before they come for the live sessions. And I think it just makes a huge difference in terms of what they're able to do when they're in the sessions and they're feeling more confident in themselves. Thank you very much. Let's go to Professor Song. Again, it's going to be the same question related to finding resources. How do you find and select resources for online Korean courses? What factors matter most across listening, reading, writing, and speaking?
Well, I believe that many instructors will agree that textbooks are not sufficient to reflect real-world communication. So I often search online for additional materials. And these days, I also use AI to help me locate video clips, articles, or passages related to the themes and topics covered in class. And after gathering these resources, I evaluate them based on how well they align with my lesson objectives and whether they are appropriate for my students' proficiency levels. And then I decide whether to use the materials as they are or modify them, depending on the complexity of the content and the needs of my students. And for example, several years ago, I decided not to use traditional textbook in my advanced Korean courses. So instead, I wanted my students to engage with authentic materials that include contemporary issues in Korean society, history, culture, politics, and economics. So I initially searched for newspaper editorials, but unfortunately, most of them were either too long or too difficult for my students. So after reviewing many different sources, I finally found a column called 필동정담 in the male business newspaper, 매일경제신문. And each column is short. Usually they're under 250 words. And because the writers rotate, students are exposed to a variety of perspectives. And this also made it easier to compare different viewpoints on current social issues, left and right. And for example, some of you may remember the 이은혜 계곡 살인 사건, the Valley murder case several years ago. And when the term gaslighting became a major topic of discussion in Korean society. And one of the 필동정담 columns on gaslighting became an excellent resource for my class. And students learned about the origin of the term and discussed whether gaslighting could be considered a punishable factor in a murder case, and examined how the meaning and usage of the word had evolved over time. And the discussion naturally expanded to broader topics such as mental health, interpersonal relationships, and social awareness. So to support students' reading and writing development, I assigned 3 tasks before class. And using the comment function in Google Docs, students were required to post at least 1 question and 1 comment on the reading and 1 response to questions raised by me or their classmates. And in class, we used those comments as the basis for discussion. And because students could see the types of questions and topics that will be covered in class, they came much better prepared and participated more actively in the discussions. So through these activities, students not only expanded their academic and professional vocab, but also developed critical thinking skills. And more importantly, they learned to engage respectfully with diverse viewpoints and became more open-minded toward opinions that differed from their own. And I also try to incorporate different types of media. So, for example, I often use documentary videos from YouTube as discussion materials. And when we studied human rights issues in North Korea, I used a documentary called 장마당 Generation, 장마당 세대, produced by Liberty in North Korea. And through the stories of several young North Korean defectors, students gained a deeper understanding of the experiences of new generation of North Koreans. And personally, I learned a great deal from the documentary as well. So one thing I have realized is that searching for authentic resources creates learning opportunities not only for students, but also for instructors. And meaningful and genuine conversations are much more likely to occur when materials connect to students' lives, experiences, and interests. So ultimately, the process of selecting resources should be driven by students' needs and motivations, because when learners find content personally relevant, their engagement and investment in learning increases significantly. So I always start the semester with a survey on students' needs.
I love the idea of taking a student survey at the very beginning of the semester. It's also just a great way to get to know your students, build the connections, and see what kinds of topics are they interested in, and maybe potentially even look for ways to grow the classroom community. If you notice that a lot of students have the same interests, those are things that we can loop in and try to find. Excellent. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. And then let's go to Dr. Lee again. Same question related to finding resources. How do you find and select resources for online Korean courses? What factors matter most across listening, reading, writing, and speaking?
Yeah, other panelists already share very important, points, and I totally agree. I may add some to the Lee-Jung's very last point about authenticity. So still the filtering, as ARAM mentions, and also monitoring the important process for the instructors. But I think authenticity is really important factors to select the online resources or teaching resources in general. That means that shows how much the learners can relate themselves to that learning materials. So that's the very important factors when I select some of the online resources. So for example, I'm a fan of Google Street View, Google Maps, and Google Images. So in culture class, we have the mini project called Linguistic Landscape Project. So what students need to do is that they can collect some images from online. So some of the public signs or advertisement or flyers. So those images they can collect and analyze the Korean, how Korean is used in multilingual context. And when they look at or analyze those linguistic component, if they those materials are close to their area, for example, their neighborhood, their district, or they can more engaged in this project and more confident in analyzing it. So to me, the authenticity and how much that can make students engaged in that activity is very important factors.
I like the idea of using resources that are available to everyone, like Google Maps, and especially if they're able to make connections to their own neighborhoods. it's just such a great way for students to see, okay, this does relate to my real life, and it keeps them hooked and hopefully continuing to build on their skills. Thank you very much. So we'll go to our next question, and this kind of piggybacks nicely off what we just talked about. And let's start with you, Dr. Yoon. How do you use authentic media like K-pop, dramas, films, etc., for example, for listening and speaking practice online? And I'm especially interested to hear about if you use scaffolding, what scaffolding helps students move from comprehension to output. I know this can especially be challenging for those new Korean speakers that maybe don't have much background in the language. Thank you.
And especially students, in my classes, students are really shy. They are many of them are very introverted. So it's not easy to make them speak, in Korean. So I think one common problem with authentic material is that we sometimes stop at comprehension. So just show them some video and, give them some like comprehension questions and check answers, and that's it. So that's what I used to do in in-person class. I sometimes let them discuss together, but some shy students are just like this and listen to others talk, and they are very quiet. But in online class there are advantages, like I actively use Google Doc, and I give them some comprehension questions, and let them listen to some kind of a video clip, or kind of they watch it, and then I give them some time to digest, the contents, and let them write their answers on Google Doc. Then they just put some words, and they can see, other, students' answers too. So I think they can understand better by doing this kind of process. And then I make some breakout rooms, and let them discuss together to check their understandings, and let them present. So there are many questions, so each student at least speak something about the question. So like in-person class, as I said, their understanding was kind of vague, and they just pass without perfectly understanding what they watched or viewed. But during this process, while looking at others' answers on Google Doc and discussing together, and prepare to speak out something about they just understood. I think this was kind of working. So as I said, in-person class, we cannot just replace online course with in-person class with online course, but there are advantages. So through these processes, like discussing and viewing others text, it's not individual comprehension, but it's a kind of collaborative processing, and then they have a little more confidence in speak out in class. And many shy students standing speaking in front of many people is very challenging, but on Zoom is relatively easier, a little easier. Some students still feels uncomfortable talking to many people even on Zoom, but it's in your desk, on your desk, and you can just talk to the computer. So it encourages them to speak out with less stress in online environment. So that's one thing I found useful, is online instruction.
I like so many things about that idea of having the Google Doc. So first of all, the students are going to watch the authentic material, but then you have that wait time. So they don't feel pressured that they have to respond right away. They have to know everything. They have time to digest, think through things calmly. And then there's that big collaboration with the Google Doc. Very low stakes formative assessment. And it is gonna pull those shy students out of their shell a little bit, because they're gonna say, hey, my other classmates are typing too. Everything's not perfect, and that's okay. I can do my best. But also, what one student might have understood, another student maybe didn't understand, so they can get pieces from each other. I love the idea. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Dr. Lee, I'll go to you next. And again, the same question. How do you use authentic materials and media like K-pop, dramas, films, etc., for listening and speaking practice online? What scaffolding helps students move from comprehension to output?
Mhm. we have a very extroverted students in my at GSU. I think maybe Aram agrees that, right? So I think one thing we can do with the using those materials like a K-pop or K-drama film is that um, promote student creativity by doing this. I think that's the biggest advantages you can take from using authentic and unique materials. So as Dr. Yoon just mentioned that online course has offers very safe place somehow, right? So student has more time to prepare and then they repeat several times. They redo their assignment. So somehow they have a online course offers the safer place to practice, especially for speaking and listening practice. So one of the example that came up my mind is that that in drama course we have a dubbing activity. So which is the students select a scene and then they practice that particular scene. It's about 1 minute or so. That's quite long. And then they muted those dialogue and then dubbing those dialogue after practice a lot for that specific part. And that's the first step. And then in advanced level, the next level for promoting the creativity side, they can create their own dialogue instead of just following and repeating those already existing dialogue. They can create their own dialogue, which is not related to the original one. Sometimes it's very funny, like out of blue kind of conversation by using the expression they learn. So that's how I can. One of the examples that I use the authentic materials in promoting the speaking and listening practice, which is very fun. Yes.
Definitely a lot of fun. And my personal experience as a student, I remember doing parody skits in my upper level Japanese, even in high school, upper level Spanish. We did little parody skits based on some of the stories that we read or um, popular dramas during the day, although that was a very long time ago. But it's a great way to get students engaged, and they might take a little bit more risk too. If it's just kind of a normal everyday scene, maybe not as risky, but if you want to kind of get that joke in and make sure the punchline makes sense. You might have to use vocabulary or grammar you're not as familiar with, but you want to get the joke in, so you're going to try. But it pushes them outside of their comfort zone where that growth really happens. Thank you so much. Professor Song, we'll go to you next. And again, the same question. How do you use authentic media, K-pop, dramas, films, etc., for listening and speaking practice online? What scaffolding helps move students from comprehension to output?
In my elementary Korean courses, I have often used K-pop lyrics and clips from Korean variety shows, especially when they reinforce vocab, grammar, or cultural concepts that students have already encountered in a textbook. So, for example, when students learned about the Korean first birthday celebration and the tradition of 돌잡이, and I used a clip from the Korean reality show, The Return of Superman, 슈퍼맨이 돌아왔다. And in the textbook, students learned several objects commonly placed on the 돌상 table, but the TV program included additional items such as stethoscope and gavel. So I added those words to the daily vocab list and asked students to study them before class. And to prepare students for the listening activity, I first provided guiding questions so that they would know what information to focus on while watching. So, for example, what objects are on the 돌상 and what did the twins pick during the first 돌잡이 and what did they pick during the second 돌잡이? And because the students knew exactly what they were looking for, they could watch more actively and comprehend the content more successfully. And after watching the clip, students answered the comprehension questions and discussed their answers with confidence. Then in pairs, they described 돌잡이 tradition in their own words. And after that, they compared it with traditions in their own countries. They discussed questions such as whether there was a special first birthday celebration in their culture, or whether there are other milestone birthdays that were celebrated in a meaningful way. So, for example, some students talked about Sweet 16 celebrations in the US, and while others introduced similar traditions from their own cultural backgrounds. So, this intercultural comparison naturally led to a more personalized speaking task with a different partner. Students talked about memorable or special birthday experience using guided questions such as how old are you? When is your birthday? Which birthday was the most special and why? And what did you do on that birthday? And what presents did you get? And who are they from? How did you like the presents? And what kind of present would you like to get next time? So finally, students switch partners again and share their special birthday story without using the guided questions. By this point, they have already practiced the language and organized their ideas, so they're much more comfortable speaking spontaneously. So in fact, students post their special birthday stories on a Padlet board before coming to class. So which serves as another layer of preparation. So while listening to their partners, they take notes and later report their partner stories to the whole class. So in this activity, the scaffolding includes pre-teaching vocab, providing focused viewing questions, and having students prepare their own stories before class, and using guided questions to support conversation. So these steps gradually move students from understanding the input to producing their own meaningful and personalized output. And one thing I have learned is that even the beginning level students can talk about much more than we sometimes expect. When the topic is familiar and directly connected to their own experiences, students are highly motivated to communicate. So by building from comprehension tasks to personal and intercultural discussions, they can use Korean not only to demonstrate what they understand, but also to share who they are and what matters to them. So rather than asking students to speak immediately after watching a video, I provide multiple layers of support that gradually build both comprehension and confidence.
The scaffolding on that is amazing. And I love how with every step, you're pushing students outside of their comfort zone, but not too much. So they are being stretched, but it's not uncomfortable. And then we continue to move up and up and up. And I just love that. I also really like the idea of having students share their own stories and even cultural traditions. And I found in a lot of cases when we do culture discussions in my online classroom, I have students from all over the world and they share stories about their holidays and their traditions and they make connections with each other. So it's just such a good way to build the community as well and obviously make really meaningful connections with your students as you're getting to know them and their stories. Thank you so much. Excellent. And then Dr. Cho, let's go to you. Again, it's going to be the same question. How do you use authentic media like K-pop, dramas, films, etc., for listening and speaking practice online? What scaffolding helps students move from comprehension to output?
I think other panelists already shared really good points, and I couldn't agree more on those parts. I think students really enjoy authentic media, and many of my students already have a personal kind of connection to Korean culture before they coming to our classroom. And they have a favorite K-pop group, favorite drama, or like Instagram or YouTube channel that they follow. So I try to take advantage of that interest and use it as a like starting point for their language learning. So what I do in my K-pop course, and also like lower level in-person courses. I often use K-pop song and lyrics to reinforce their grammar learning. So sometimes I use lyrics to work on vocabulary, sometimes pronunciation and rhythm, or sometimes cultural meaning behind the lyrics. But I try not to stop at the, simple translating the lyrics. And we might look at some recurring expressions in the lyrics, compare the language used in the song with everyday Korean. Or have students take some of the vocabulary and use it in their own sentences. So from my experiences, BTS Spring Day, 봄날, for example, has been a great resource for practicing like plain speech form and also 고 싶다 ending. And another good example of K-pop songs that I often use in my upper level classrooms is the Girls' Generation's T and Hyogo's Wing Wing for these have been a great resource for learning onomatopoeia in Korean. So I try to use those K-pop songs into the grammar sessions because sometimes students are very overwhelmed by learning all the details in grammars. So when I introduce those songs, it also reinforced their grammar language learning, but also they tend to really be interested and invest their time actually learning that grammar point. So it works very well for the parts. Another thing that I use often in my advanced class is using the drama clip. So I chose a short scene from either a movie or a drama, like 3 to no more than 5 minute clip. First, I just let them watch it once just to understand the overall situation. But it's the very short scene from like a 2 hours, sometimes like 16 episodes. So they don't know what's going on. Then we watch it again with more specific purpose. Maybe I ask them to figure out the relationship between the speakers, like notice how somebody expresses like disagreement, who used the polite ending to whom, which types of kinship terms are used in the conversations, like identify a particular expressions. Then we move into the kind of stage with something they learn from the textbook, like they can apply their prior knowledge of Korean grammars and expressions to kind of decode the drama scene. Sometimes students realize like, oh, maybe this is what it is because this person looked young, but they use 사장님 to others. So this person might be in like different or higher length in the scene or something. So it's very important. I mean, it's very interesting for them to kind of understand the real context and also good opportunity to reapply their grammar learning into the watching dramas and learning from it.
One of the things I try to avoid is burnout with my online students, and using even a short clip from a movie or a popular K-drama is a great way to try to avoid some of that burnout and keep them coming back and hopefully continuing to enroll with us. But also, it sounds like it's kind of a good way to get some cultural references to, as you said, figuring out what is the relationship between the two characters as they speak with each other. And you want to listen for honorifics or speech patterns, maybe even gestures, just depending on the context. And it's good to have that cultural background as well. So they're getting their grammar content, but at the same time, it's something a little different and refreshing. K-dramas, obviously, and movies are very interesting. And there's also that cultural component as well. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and move to our third question. Professor Song, we'll start with you. What tools or approaches work best for pronunciation and speaking practice when face-to-face interaction is limited? Very true of the online world.
Yeah, when face-to-face interaction is limited and as class time is not always sufficient, I use a combination of technology-supported practice and AI-assisted conversation tools to give students additional opportunities to develop their listening, pronunciation, and speaking skills. And one resource I created is the mobile-based listening aid, MBLA, which is hosted on SoundCloud and can be accessed on mobile devices. So basically, students can use it much like a music streaming app. They listen to pre-recorded audio, repeat after the speakers, and practice shadowing outside of class. And this material is available as an open educational resource, OER, that I created. So anyone is welcome to use it free of charge. I used the textbook, Integrated Korean Beginning 1 and 2 in my elementary Korean classes. And I originally created MBLA as a supplementary resource because I wanted conversations that were more closely connected to the Cornell environment and reflected more realistic communicative situations. So I also wanted to provide extended dialogues that integrated the vocab and grammar students had learned in class. So to make the stories more engaging, I even sprinkled a little romance into some of the dialogues. And I hired 4 students to record the scripts. And interestingly, 2 of those students ended up getting married several years later. Yeah. And each lesson folder consists of 4 components. The first, grammar overview. It's a brief explanation of the target grammar points. And the second, drill exercises. So in general, in class, we focus primarily on communicative activities. So we do not spend much time on mechanical drills. But grammar patterns and conjugations still require repeated practice. So these listening and response exercises allow students to practice independently outside class. And third, model conversation. This is an extended dialogue demonstrating how the target vocab and grammar can be used in a realistic context. It represents the level of a conversation that I hope my students will be able to produce by the end of the lesson. And lastly, speaking practice. Students listen to questions and respond orally. And this encourages them to actively produce language rather than simply recognize it. So through these regular shadowing and speaking practices, students can improve their pronunciation, rhythm, intonation, and connected speech. However, because SoundCloud does not record student responses, I use Canvas quizzes for speaking assignments. So basically, students submit their recordings there, and then instructors provide individualized feedback on their performance. And in addition to MBLA, I began using an AI chatbot called Chitter Chatter last semester. Educators can receive free access by registering, but there is a small fee for students. However, the first semester is free of charge if you contact the creator. I believe that many institutions are now exploring AI-based language learning tools, so it may also be worth checking with your university's language resource center or educational technology office to see what resources are available. Chitter Chatter was developed by a Cornell PhD student in information science. Although the platform is now used by students and instructors at a number of universities beyond Cornell. Each semester, students have access to multiple practice sessions, and instructors can either create their own prompts or adapt to ready-made templates, which makes implementation quite simple. One advantage of AI chatbots is that they provide a low-stakes environment for speaking practice. So students can rehearse conversations, prepare for oral tests, and experiment with language without worrying about being evaluated by their instructor. Of course, AI is not perfect, and I would not say that I observe dramatic improvements in students' speaking proficiency. However, I did notice something equally important. Students became less anxious about speaking Korean. Because Chitter Chatter is not assigning grades and tends to provide supportive and encouraging feedback, students are often more willing to take risks and speak more. For that reason, I view AI not as a replacement for human interaction, but as an additional practice partner that helps build confidence and lowers the affective filter before students engage in real communication with classmates and instructors.
I couldn't agree more. And that's one of the challenges, especially for those of us who have very shy, introverted students in an online classroom where we're trying to get them to output and they're nervous because they're speaking, in some cases, a language they have very minimal exposure to. So I like the idea of using an app like Chitter Chatter to help kind of lower that affective filter and just bring a sense of normalcy. And congratulations on your mobile-based listening aid. I think that is an amazing feature. I also love the idea of just giving students the repetition, having them hear the words over and over, but again, speaking back and outputting the language. Even if it's not perfect every time, it's the repetition that's going to help them continue to move up the ladder of proficiency. So hopefully students will continue to take Korean classes and maybe meet their future spouse. Who knows? Thank you very much. Excellent. Let's go to Dr. Cho next. And again, same question. What tools or approaches work best for pronunciation and speaking practice when face-to-face interaction is limited?
Oh, thank you. I think speaking practice is probably one of the areas I've been struggled with the most in online teaching, especially like in asynchronous lower level courses, like one-on-one courses. Um, my initial thought is that there really isn't a tool that can kind of fully replace the in-person, like face-to-face interaction. Um, Although I did use several AI tools to help to create like more similar like face-to-face interaction. For example, ChatGPT has a conversation tool, so you can create a conversation with ChatGPT using your voice tool. They're getting better, and I think the experience is but I still think that the experience is quite different from the kind of interaction we can have in in-person classroom. But for pronunciation, though, I actually think online teaching can sometimes give students an opportunity they don't always have in face-to-face classroom because they have more time and they will have a chance to hear themselves. So like in-person classroom, we usually have like 30 students. And when students say something once, I give them some feedback, but then we have to move on to the next students because there are already like 29 other students waiting. So, but in online, I think I can ask students to record a short response or listen to it themselves and then try again. We can do all those process. So when I ask them to re-record what they just say, the second recording can sometimes be much better than the first. Not necessarily because I gave them a explanation or feedback, but simply because they had an opportunity to hear their own pronunciation. So I've used tools like VoiceThread and Flip for this, but honestly, I don't think the tools are very important in this part of practice, we can simply use those tools like recording, and students can just submit their recording assignment built into the online course platform. I think the most important thing is the opportunity to check back their recording and the feedback and opportunity to try again. So I don't, when they submit their pronunciation or read the sentences recording, I don't try to correct every single pronunciation problem. But because if I point out like every single issue, students can sometimes can be overwhelmed and like lose their confidence, which is very unfortunate for continuing Korean practicing. So instead, I focus on one or two like priorities, such as like the particular pronunciation rule that they need to know or intonation pattern. And I also record the correct word or read out the sentences in my feedback so students can hear the difference and identify what they missed. Then I ask them to record the same response or same sentence or word again and submit it. Um, it's not like something that we can spontaneously doing in in-person classroom, but in online classroom it works well. And if students are listening, responding, and like revising, and they are checking their pronunciation gradually and becoming more comfortable producing reading Korean, I think we are still like creating good opportunities for possible speaking or speaking practice in the future. And also what I learned from online courses, online asynchronous courses, I don't think we really necessarily need to make an asynchronous class look exactly like an in-person class. I think that's probably one of the biggest lesson I've learned from teaching speaking course and 1001 course asynchronous online. So instead of trying to like reproduce the face-to-face classroom, we can take advantage of strengths of the we instead of reproducing like the face-to-face classroom, we can make or we can take advantage of strengths of the online environment, like recording, replaying, revisiting, slowing down, listening to themselves multiple times, getting more feedback and trying again. So it can create like different kind of speaking practice, hopefully.
You made a really good point that I think a lot of times when we're teaching more in the asynchronous environment, we feel pressure to make sure that there's that interactive practice, which is important, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, when we can use tools, and as you said, it doesn't necessarily matter what tool, it's essentially the practice that they're getting. Is there that recording? And then is there the meaningful feedback? So using what we have to work with to not perfectly replicate interaction that's live and ongoing, but at least having some interaction. You also mentioned the importance of that personalized feedback, but not inundating the students because it is easy to go overboard and give them too much, and that can impact their confidence. So it's a lot of things to balance and think about, but I think it is important to recognize that if you are teaching asynchronously, it's not going to be perfect, but we can use tools like what you mentioned, things like Voice for Thread and Flip to hopefully help bridge those gaps. Thank you very much. Dr. Yoon, let's go to you again. It's going to be the same question. What tools or approaches work best for pronunciation and speaking practice when face-to-face interaction is limited?
Actually, Mijong and Aram already mentioned what I was going to talk about, already. So maybe I have to repeat, some parts. Uh, you know, I, you know, I still believe that online course cannot replace this in-person, class. The value of this in-person is very important. But I actually think this for pronunciation, the online environment has some advantages. As Aram mentioned in-person class, we cannot listen to students' pronunciation clearly, but through online, we have this headset and, they speak very close to, microphone. So we can give them some, specific feedback. In first year, online class, we hold like one-on-one session, office hour session to check their pronunciation when they learn Hangul. So, that's working even better than like in-person meeting because we can listen to their pronunciation clearly. So yeah, uh, that's one advantage. And the important and another advantage is we have them record their voice, more for online courses. We can do that in-person class too, but there are more opportunities for them to listen to their own pronunciations. That's really important. So while doing this, I could see that they improve their pronunciation. And this is a little off the topic, but recently I realized that compared to like 10, 20 years ago, nowadays, our students' pronunciation is a little better. So I thought about this. What's the reason? Maybe probably this Korean culture is more like, approachable to most students. So even though they are coming to the first year Korean class, they at least had some opportunities of listening to Korean words, Korean pronunciations through K-pop or K-drama. So, let them listen to a lot. We need more input, for them to make more Korean-like pronunciation. So, lots of idea were mentioned, but I like this project, creating videos. So for beginning level course, for example, you can just describe your room using those, location words like there is something on the table or something. So you just, video tape, record a video with your phone while describing your room. While doing this kind of video project, they rehearse, and, they record many, many times and listen to their pronunciation. So, that's really helpful for them to pronounce Korean more accurately. For intermediate learners, we have this assignments. Find a Korean person and interview them. So they prepare for some interview questions and meet, real Korean person and have conversations with them. And for third year Korean, we have assignments like, make a presentation about something they know well. So some students make presentation about the recipe of some food they can cook well, or they make presentation about a city they visited, like Seoul. I went to Seoul, and so they make presentations on video. It's important to speak in front of many people, but as I mentioned, some students are very shy, and they prefer to make their video at home. And while doing that, I realized that they practice a lot. They try to articulate, and they care about this tone, and so they think more about this pronunciation while doing this video project. So I really like this, video project. And Mijong mentioned lots of fancy AI tools. So yeah, we can make use of them, and also and also we can create, simple tools, using ChatGPT tools. Like you can create your own GPT, modifying it just for your class purpose. So yeah, so we have lots of great tools for online, and we can make use of them for in-person class too. So we have to make use of those advantages of those technology, for Korean language classes.
So you made two interesting points. One is just that now students have more access to repetition, but in general, now that I think about it, when I first started to teach online versus today, with the novice students, most of them do have better pronunciation. And it's just thinking about that, as you said that, yeah, you're right. Most of them do have better pronunciation now. And I think that is because they have access to more media from the target language. Hopefully, when our students sign up for our classes, it's because they're interested in the language and they want to learn it. So it would make sense that they would use media from the target language. And I like that idea. But also, the repetition. So whether it be that they're recording their own voice and they're going back and listening, or maybe making their own corrections, or maybe even just over um, listening to maybe their same favorite Korean drama over and over again, watching the same scenes, or if it's a commercial they liked, maybe they watch it several times. It's a great way to continue that repetition. And that's ultimately, I think, helping them improve. And yes, I'm hoping that that trend continues, that students' pronunciation will continue to improve over time. Excellent. Thank you so much. Dr. Lee, we'll go to you again. Same question. What tools or approaches work best for pronunciation and speaking practice when face-to-face interaction is limited?
Yeah, I think we already talked about many different strengths of the online space for teaching and learning speaking. I think there are key 3 points already discussed, which is the self-monitoring, it's measuring the growth, and like Sarah just mentioned about the repeated practice, and also the reduce the learner's anxiety. I think those 3 areas we all agree to, explain to answer your question. And maybe one thing I could add is giving more, detailed individual feedback using the practices online for speaking practice. So one of the example that I did in my class is that the preparing and doing pitch, so which is a very short speech the student to make to sell ideas or throw a ball about something. So like they scripted and prepare those short speech called pitch, and then that short speech can really the practice really helpful for them to practice, considering all these advantages, and also for me to closely look at their speech and giving feedback.
Excellent. And yes, just so many resources. And I like the idea about having a pitch. It's just a way to engage the students. Believe it or not, commercials are actually, I think, a great way to engage students just because they're interesting. And hopefully, if you're an effective ad campaign manager, you make your commercial or your pitch entertaining. It's going to grab the attention of your target market. So I like the idea of using that. Excellent. So we're going to go ahead and do, I think, one more question, keeping in mind that we're just about at 15 on my end. So maybe about 15 minutes if we can kind of keep our responses somewhat limited, but still have a good discussion. This is going into AI, so this is kind of piggybacking on what we just talked about. Well, Dr. Lee, we'll start with you for this one. Have you used AI as a resource in your online classroom to help students climb the proficiency ladder? And we'd love to know about what works, what doesn't, and how you encourage using AI as a learning tool rather than a shortcut.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not specifically for design for the proficiency focus, but I had experience of using the AI song creating program called Suno. And students can make their own, write their song, and then they can choose different options, like what kind of styles and what kind of singer they want to do, what kind of genre of their song. So they can add those information and then create the song. So it was it's not solely focusing on proficiency development activities, but it's very creative activity for them to do something with their languages and fun activity in class to share each other's songs. So it was really interesting in my advanced class last semester. And this idea was from the one of my colleague, Professor Jin from Emory University. So I learned this program from her use of it in her class.
Songs are just a great way to bring people together in general. So I love the idea of encouraging students to choose a song and even choosing the genre of music they like. There's probably quite a variety in the types of music people like, so everyone can listen to each other's songs and decide which ones they like. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Dr. Yoon, we'll go to you again. This is the same question about AI. What tool, or sorry, have you used AI as a resource in your online classroom to help students climb the proficiency ladder? What works, what doesn't, and how do you encourage using AI as a learning tool rather than a shortcut?
So when I was teaching like online courses, AI was not available, during this pandemic. So, but I'm trying to use AI for my, other courses. But recently I've noticed that some of our students have very negative attitude on AI. So, for example, in my class, I created some images using AI and told my students, oh, these images are created by ChatGPT or Gemini. And some of my students told me, oh, 선생님, you are ruining this environment and, you should not use AI. So, okay, but but I don't know. So, it's a very critical issue. Should we allow them to use AI, or should we make use of AI more actively for our classes? Actually, I'm more prone to the second, like the latter. We used to think like, uh, technology is ruining our education or something, but everybody is using like some kind of technology, and I think AI will be used more widely in language classes, and actually it's already happening. But still now, I think rather than just let them use AI, like, we can just let them chat with ChatGPT or like speak with them, and, we can do lots of activities with them. But some students have a negative attitude on that, and we cannot just force them to do that. But from our side, from teacher's side, it's very useful. I used to spend lots of time finding out some appropriate, images for my class, online, but eventually failed to do that. Or I just copied, fancy, images from ESL, English book, and, change those English words into Korean. So I used to do that, but now I can create, fancy images like Korean, context very easily. And I can make cartoons, showing some, environment, let them, create conversations more. Or there's a infographic. Like if we put some text on, especially Gemini is good at that. If we put a text, a story, for example, a story on Gemini and ask it to create a infographic, it makes a very precise, like, images, containing all the contents of this story. So, like, I just talk about this story and give them this kind of infographic and, reproduce the story with their own words. That kind of exercise was working really well. And I'm teaching one translation course, and I offered this, twice. And the first time I just let them use AI for their translation. In the beginning, I asked them to use different types of AI tools like, ChatGPT and Gemini. So same text, but different AI tools, and, let them translate, And then, there are differences. So, I asked students to analyze those, differences and why those differences arise, when we use different AI tools. And especially Korean, lots of elements can be omitted. When we speak, we just omit subject, object, depending on context. And while retrieving those information, AIs, different AIs, take different approaches. So, I let them analyze those things and, it was okay. But the next year, AIs have been improved and they are translating very well. So it's not easy to compare those, differences. So now I use ChatGPT or Claude to make uh, like verbatim translation, a word by word translation. So the translation itself sounds very awkward, and Korean text and word by word translation. And I ask students to modify this translation into natural English. And then, they talk about where they changed, how they changed while discussing this linguistic and cultural differences between Korean and English. So like this, we can make use of AI for reducing, our burden of creating like resources. And, AI tools are really good at repetitive, jobs. Like, they can make like, short quizzes, practicing vocabulary very easily. And as I said, they can make, images really well. So yeah, but that I think now what I'm doing is I'm just doing this very traditional approach, but I make use of AI tools to create, class materials and, revising my old materials into, fancy form. And I also created a GPT giving feedback, students writing feedback, and I'm currently doing this research, how much this can replace this human teacher, but still it GPT gives very good feedback, but there are some mistakes, and students cannot distinguish between good feedback and bad feedback. So it can be supportive to like it can be an assistant to this teacher, but I don't think it's good to just let students use AI for getting feedback, when they write. So yeah, so I think we are in the stage of like AI development. So still, we should be very cautious, using AI tools for our class, especially online class, because we have less student contact.
You made so many good points. And thinking about, yes, when I originally started teaching online, we didn't have AI. So we had to make everything on our own. I like your idea of taking content we made previously and running it through AI for improvements, or even just making it a little bit more up to date. Sometimes things are a little bit dated and we might want to refresh them a bit. I thought it was interesting that some of your students react negatively to AI, and I can understand that. I notice Gen Z, Gen Alpha, as I've worked with them, some of them are great with it, and others, have a little bit more of a negative reaction, or they're just maybe a little bit leery of it, I think is maybe the best way to put it, just in my experience. So it is important that we kind of balance that. I think AI has a lot to offer students, but we might want to be a little bit mindful if our students are reluctant to use it. We don't want to force it, as you said. Perfect. Thank you so much. Professor Cho, we'll go to you. And again, the question was, have you used AI as a resource in your online classroom to help students climb the proficiency ladder? What works, what doesn't, and how do you encourage using AI as a learning tool rather than a shortcut?
I completely agree with Dr. Yoon because I've been incorporating ChatGPT into my advanced Korean courses for writing for the past few years, and I've actually seen very different reactions from students. Some students are very, very hesitant about AI tools, like they don't really trust it, or they feel like using it means like they're not doing their work themselves and they are not learning anything. But On the other hand, I also have students who are very comfortable with AI tools, and some of the other courses, especially for online courses, I often notice lots of students are using AI tools for their homework, even in a situation where I ask them like not to use them. So sometimes it's very frustrated to see like lots of students are using AI tools to complete their assignments, where when I ask like AI tools to use them in their practice, and they said like no. So I think part of our role as an instructor now is not simply to tell like students whether they can or cannot use AI tools, but more like help them understand like how to use it appropriately as like part of their learning process. And I think one thing that AI tools can do well, particularly, is give students more opportunities to kind of interact with Korean, whether it's speaking forms or writing forms. And a lot of our students have relatively very limited exposure to Korean outside of the classroom. They might watch like TVs or listen to Korean music, but they don't really interact in Korean outside of the classroom. So um, so if they use AI tools, they can actually practice their Korean more like constantly. And in my advanced Korean course, it's in-person course, but I use ChatGPT for writing practices. So what I did is pretty similar to what Dr. Yoon did in his class. I asked them to first draft their writing in Korean, and then do a back translating. So I asked them to like put their initial draft to ChatGPT or Gemini or any other AI tools they choose, and then ask them to translate that to English so that they can compare their original Korean draft with English translation and see what has been lost in translation. And is it actually what I was trying to say, or what did AI interpret my sentence this way? Then they can use AI to kind of identify expressions that might be unclear or point out some possible errors, especially like the particles. Sometimes it's not really translated well in English. So that kind of give my students to think about whether their intended meaning is actually coming across in their native language. So my point is, I think AI tools can help students practice more and notice more, like question more, revise more, or communicate more. But I think if if that can help that way, good way, I think it would be very it would be valuable to both teachers and students.
I agree. AI truly is valuable, and especially in real-world applications where they're able to maybe write out what they want, send it through AI and say, okay, what are my mistakes? So kind of learning from the mistakes, which I think is a great way to learn in general. Um, but at the same time, we have to be good models of the right way to use AI. And we do also want to set boundaries where we're saying, "Hey, this is a homework assignment that I need you to do independently. Please don't use ChatGPT to help you with this. I need to see what you can do." So there is kind of a mix of you want to set the boundaries and be clear about the right way to use AI and then demonstrate how to do it as well. So that way students are more comfortable. Excellent. Thank you so much. And then Professor Song, will go to you. Again, same question. Have you used AI as a resource in your classroom to help students climb the proficiency ladder? What works, what doesn't, and how do you encourage using AI as a learning tool rather than a shortcut? I know you did share some great resources with us, but we'd love to hear more if you have anything else to add.
Yes, I cannot agree more with what Dr. Yoon and Joe said, earlier. And I was about to talk about the writing skills. So I believe AI can be a very useful tool for helping students, especially improving their writing skills. But how we integrate it into our courses matters a great deal. If students are simply allowed to submit a final written product online, there's always a temptation to rely too heavily on AI generated text. So in that case, very little learning may actually take place. So for this reason, I changed all of my writing assignments so that the final compositions are like a handwritten in class rather than submitted online. So at the same time, I encourage students to use AI during the preparation stage, and I do not recommend them using AI to generate an entire draft. Instead, I present AI as a writing assistant that supports students' own ideas and authentic language production. So students can use it to brainstorm, organize their thoughts, check grammar, and improve sentence accuracy or identify patterns in the errors. Because students ultimately write their compositions in class, they cannot simply copy and paste or memorize what AI had produced. So they have to internalize the content and language themselves. So when students develop their own ideas and use AI only as a support tool, they are much more likely to retain the vocab, expressions, and content they want to communicate. One benefit I have noticed is improvement in accuracy. In the past, I would often mark the same grammatical errors repeatedly in student papers, and some students continue to make those mistakes despite receiving extensive feedback, so many red marks. However, when students began using AI as a revision tool, many of those recurring errors decreased since AI provided immediate feedback and allows students to notice and correct mistakes during the writing process rather than after the fact. So that said, I think it is important to establish clear expectations. I tell my students that AI should not replace their thinking or writing. Instead, it should function as a tutor or editor. The goal is not to have AI write for them, but to help them become more independent and accurate writers.
I really do love the idea of having students handwrite because I think that makes it a lot more difficult to just put in an AI prompt and copy paste. Plus, they're also getting that physical handwritten repetition. So I just love the strategy in general. And I have noticed a little bit more of that too. Whenever students get that initial instant feedback, if they're making the same mistakes over and over again, I think they're a lot more likely to catch it when they get the feedback immediately versus when I turn it around 24 hours later in Canvas with their written feedback, if they check that at all. But whenever there is that instant feedback, I think that's very useful and it's a good way to stop some of those patterns that we don't want and help them to continue to move up that ladder of proficiency. This has been an amazing panel, fantastic conversation, feedback, ideas, and I can certainly vouch that I'm more excited about going back to school next week after this conversation. So thank you all very, very much for being here. Jim Yoshioka has kindly dropped in our panel 2 survey into the chat. If you could please fill that out, all of our participants, that would be greatly appreciated as we do use this feedback to continue to improve our webinars and make them better for everyone. Now, we will be back with our third and sadly final session for the series, and that is going to be for those of you on the East Coast, that's going to be Tuesday the 25th at 7 p.m. All of our time zones are listed on our website for the series. I'm going to go ahead and pop that into the chat for anybody who might want to bookmark that. And you can see which days, time zones will reply to you, as I know we have folks joining us from all over the world, and we're just so thankful for taking the time to be with us for this past hour and a half. Really great conversations. Really looking forward to wrapping up the series. I guess for the East Coast folks, it's going to be Tuesday the 25th at 7. Thank you all very much for being here. Warmest mahalo and aloha to everybody. We appreciate you being here, and we hope to see you for our next session coming up. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.